Welcome back to another episode of Questions with Crocker with me, Dr. Crocker, and my husband, Shane.
I'm here drinking my Mountain Dew.
And we have two special guests with us. Would you guys like to introduce yourselves?
Sure. I'm Dr. Emily King.
And I'm Richie King.
And the King dynasty is in the house, I feel like. We also have Harrison here with us, and he's off camera helping out with the podcast today. But why don't you tell them a little bit about what you guys are doing in town, hanging out with us, and what's been going on?
Yeah, I mean, we've been here for a couple days, just, collecting some content.
Enjoying the heat.
Enjoying the heat, that's right. And, just strategizing on some new endeavors, and it's pretty exciting.
I think one of the best parts of social media is actually connecting with people that maybe you never would have met before, and then meeting in real life and having them be great, genuine, and have the same goals. And
they may not be thinking the same thing about us. I mean, we're being very optimistic with our
we're like, we like you, let's be friends. And you're like,
It's mutual. I think it's really cool. I do agree with you. Otherwise, there's paths that may never cross, and so it's really cool because when we started to get to know each other because of Harrison, and then it was like, oh wait, our husbands are so similar in terms of what their responsibilities and goals. And
conversation, they were talking about how good looking we were and how smart, and
let them keep talking, right?
Just let them keep going.
Oh gosh. So yeah, it's really cool.
I was about to say these two might take over if we're not careful. So yeah, so Harrison is part of King Media, actually the owner of it. And I think it's really cool because the way I first found out about you guys and him was actually because you guys have All-Star Veterinary Clinic, and it's a really big social media presence. And I was watching it and just saying, they look like they're having so much fun. They look like they love what they're doing. So I just said, like, who does your social media? And then Harrison said, it's me. And it's been great having him be a resource to help me with some of the projects that I've had. And then on top of that, getting to meet you guys and just finding out more and more about the practice. So tell us a little bit more about All-Star. To recap for people, because I do always get in trouble for this. This is a podcast where we're not experts. I'm an emergency veterinarian.
I am not.
Shane is
an emergency veterinarian.
What would you say your role is?
We talk about this every week, and I don't have a clear answer for that.
Someone needs to give Shane a title. If someone wants to send in a good title for
Richie,
him.
you can come up with that.
Yeah.
You're good at titles.
Yeah, sure can.
Yeah. Richie has similar job responsibilities, but Shane works from home, and I mean, essentially is a stay-at-home dad, but also runs businesses and things that we have going on, and is the reason that we can do all the things we do, essentially. And so we just talk about our experiences being practice owners, emergency work, things in veterinary medicine going on, and we take people's questions. So we did field a couple questions for you guys, but why don't you talk a little bit about your background too, so people kind of know where you're coming from with your perspectives and your experiences.
Good.
Yeah, I'd say we're not experts as well. We've just lived it we've just lived it. So I think, it's just talking from experience, more than anything, which is a great teacher. But we opened All-Star Veterinary Clinic in 2003.
June.
So, and we just hung a sign, that old traditional saying, you just hung a sign and then just prayed, and it all worked out. So I just think at this point now, so we've gone from myself as a veterinarian in 2003, just added people slowly over time. And so now we have about 50 employees. So, and 11 veterinarians. So I think, hey. Yes.
Yes, you can go over there.
But I don't know if she's home.
Oh, if the garage isn't open, I wouldn't. But you can go see the horses and go over there. But also, yes, on your iPad. We're doing a podcast though, so like,
Sorry.
Okay.
love you. Bye.
Welcome to our lives. So like we have 5 boys and you guys have 1 boy, and so that times 5 in terms of interruptions and distractions is like, yeah, it's just like this is like so normal routine.
So actually what happened is someone would bust on the podcast and say, the baby's on the roof. What are we doing?
Be a little more extreme than just like,
yes, that's exactly what would happen, because that is what happened.
Is what happened, yeah.
So anyway, back to the clinic. I think so now it's a larger entity that we're really proud of, because I feel like we've made a really positive impact on the community. And it's been really fun to see that,
I think it's interesting for people that are going from, starting out, there's one veterinarian and then their dreams are growing and getting bigger. And I mean, we're only 2-3 years in and we're at 2 vets. I'm in and out there, but I do want to grow it, but it does seem like a very kind of slow process. Okay. But then I look at your practice and look at some others and I'm like, but you can do it. You can eventually get bigger and grow. And
it just like snowballs on itself. So once you start to get all your processes in place and then people start talking about it as a place to work and then that, you know what I mean? And it's just like, then it just rolls. And before you know it, it's like, oh my God. Okay. Like we have more people than we have work for. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like you could end up in that place. And I think if people just focus on creating a good work environment, then all that happens.
That's actually a question I want to get to is kind of when do you know when to maybe add a vet versus, growing your clientele? Like, where is that sweet spot? Or is it you just find somebody and you're like, let me snatch them up? But first, Richie, what is your role? We talk about kind of swim lanes between the two of us, like being married, you got to kind of have roles and jobs defined. So what would you say your swim lane is?
My role from day one was always business manager, kind of the back end, manage the numbers, make sure that we were on track.
Making money.
Right. Make sure that, you're meeting your KPIs. And one of the things that I was struck by during that journey was that it's a steep learning curve, but it's constant. You're constantly learning. You're constantly trying to position yourselves to enjoy that success. And the world has changed a lot between 2003 and now. I mean, back then it was, marketing was very, very basic. It wasn't like it is today. We have so many different avenues to reach potential clients. So, and even the things that we offer today are very different than they were back then. When we opened, we were trying to position ourselves as a one-stop shop with vet services, boarding, grooming, and then we slowly, concentrated down to veterinary services. So, so that was my role from the very beginning. And I took an interest in the marketing aspect and just slowly educated myself. And I'm a big podcast consumer. So I would learn through that and then read books and just try to do things differently than what was being presented in the marketplace.
Yeah. I think when we started getting into it, Shane was a little surprised a little bit by the veterinary industry and kind of how it runs as a business versus other businesses that we had been a part of, because there is such an emotional component to what you're doing also. And there's a big public perception of what they kind of expect from veterinarians. And so he was shocked kind of by the margins and how tight they really were compared to other businesses. And then also the feeling, I think, as a vet, which is good to have somebody who's not the vet, but the feeling of, I want to help people and maybe I will lose a little money doing it. And he's sitting over here saying, well, a little money is okay, but losing a lot of money, you're not going to be able to do the things you need to do to grow the practice and take care of your people. So I think having the balance of having someone in vet med and out of vet med is a good partnership. What would you say?
It's a partnership.
What did you think? What did you think was the weirdest thing you saw happening where you were like, you've got to be kidding me?
I don't know. That's a good question. I think mainly because I dug into the numbers out of the gate. So some of the numbers that I was looking at just didn't compute with some of the other industries. Now, some of it is you don't work in the business full time. I think a veterinarian working in the business full time changes the margins some. But it took me a while to kind of wrap my head around the margins and how the money would flow. So I don't know. I don't know about weirdness.
I just know all the time he's like, wait, what? What are you doing? And how are we pricing things and what? And it just, even the fact that you don't just make your, upcharges the same across the board. It's kind of different depending on the service and depending on the price that it starts at. There's just a lot of things that were a little different. And then
I think some of it's a little different too, because we purchased an existing business. Yes. So trying to understand their pricing strategies they had in place and where can we make some tweaks without running off customers, that type of thing was not problematic, but it was different than starting. Yeah, it was a challenge.
Yeah, because you're working with an already a current landscape that you then have to.
One of the things that I was struck by when we first opened the business was because my background's business, banking, things like that. And the lack of any kind of this is 2003, any kind of guidelines. It was really hard to find guidelines. And I remember telling her when we were writing the business plan for the business, I don't even know where to go with this. I mean, I can kind of get a general idea, but I don't have any parameters. They're much more prevalent today and much
Oh,
more,
yes. Yeah.
much,
Easy to
much
get a
more
hold of.
prevalent
Yeah.
today. But the industry is still so decentralized. It's very, I liken it to pharmacies 60 years ago. It was very mom pops. You had corporate, you had concentrations here and there, but it's very decentralized. But those KPIs have come in very handy over the years as they become available and you educate yourself, you go to seminars, things like that. But going like just doing a Google search and say, what should I do? Back years ago, it was impossible to try to figure out.
I think that's very important. I've always managed businesses to ratios. So what are industry standards? How can you make sure that you're better than that? And I can only imagine doing this, like you said, 20 years ago, and those didn't exist. You're just kind of winging it. Like, hey, this is what I need to eat. But
you're looking at the bottom numbers. This has to be positive.
Yeah. We're gonna start there and then kind of work our way up.
So.
I do think too, it's changed so much just with the corporate landscape. So even now, I look sometimes at margins and KPIs and I'm like, but is this for all practices, including like private practices and corporations? Like, how do the numbers really work out? Because that the cost of goods is going to be lower for larger entities versus us as small practice owners. So I still sometimes with the ratios and the numbers, I'm like, but how is that practice ran and who runs it and who owns it? And because I think some of it could be off a little bit, but maybe that's me being non-business, looking at it. I think
that's true. I think the big corporations have a lot more purchasing power in terms of COGS. That's one of your biggest line item expenses. So they can go in and say, we've got 500 hospitals. We need this. We're going to buy from you, but we need this versus All-Star's like, what do you have? It is what it is. So what we try to do is just build that into our model so that our price structure still allowed for a healthy margin at the bottom, despite those somewhat higher COGS. Yeah. So
that's probably the hardest part of being like a smaller practice and you're feeling like, David and Goliath a little bit with some of it. But I think it's important to know that you started out as one doctor and it grew a lot. And like you said, you had to kind of adapt and change. Do you feel like, because you've been in the industry for a while, that that's probably one of the harder things for individuals that started something and then are growing a business to kind of look at the environment and say, oh, wait, things have changed. I need to adapt, because I see so many practices still doing things the same way and having the same struggles and then saying why is it not working for me? So have you always been adaptable? How are you able to do that?
Yeah. I mean, I think that at the heart of it was that I'm very competitive. So I always wanted to be better than everyone else. So even if that meant that I needed to hire people better than me, as an entity, we would be better than everyone else. So and that's the only reason that we've been able to continue to adapt and change, is that everyone that I hire has some skill set that's better than my own. And so then they bring that with them to the practice. And you just can't be afraid of change. So especially as I got to my mid 40s, because the people you make fun of are the old veterinarians that still do stupid stuff. Well, not stupid stuff, but stuff that was relevant 30 years ago, but now we have better things, right? I never, ever wanted to be referred to as somebody like that. And so that was a real fear of mine. So I was constantly trying to make sure we're never that person. I'm never that person, because then you're that person. And so then it was just required bringing in people that don't also want to be that person. So then they're in a perpetual quest for learning and improving.
Yeah. I see it when I did a relief a long time ago. It was interesting to go into practices and see them still doing things that I felt like we weren't doing anymore in veterinary medicine. And it really wasn't that they weren't good veterinarians. It's that they were in their bubble of just their practice and they had never visited anywhere else. They never really talked to anybody. And that's why I love these sort of conversations, because you do learn and you grow from talking to people that are doing the same thing as you. But when you're in the bubble, you think we're killing it. We're doing a great job. And you don't know.
Well, I think veterinarians are notorious for not wanting to change. They're notorious for, you have to be willing to listen to other people's ideas. and they may be different than your own, and they make you uncomfortable. And they, but had I not done any of that, we would not. I mean, the practice is what it is because of all of the people that have worked there and all of their ideas. These aren't these are all ideas that have been commingled together over time that people come in with, and they're like, hey, we could do this. This could make us okay. Tell me more about it. How are we going to implement it? What's going to be our plan? And I think that's what you have to be willing to do, is be willing to listen and change.
That's one of the things that I think that we talked the other night about online pharmacies. And I remember thinking years ago consciously that we need to be much more proactive versus reactive, because in that particular instance, I remember thinking we need to position ourselves today for 5 years from now.
Yeah.
Because if you wait 5 years, it's almost too late. You've got to start to think for much more forward thinking in that regard, strategically. So that's something that's helped us out a lot, is to make sure that we look at these trends, spot them, and say, this could be an issue. It may not, but it probably will. So why don't we go and position ourselves today so that once that eventuality comes about, it doesn't affect us that much.
Not as big of a deal.
Right.
Okay. So then what did you do for online pharmacies? Because I feel like it's still a big controversy a little bit. And I will, say that my philosophy is you're not going to be able to fight and compete with the prices. I mean, and you can try to make it hard. I mean, I know some veterinarians that refuse to do online prescriptions that are outside pharmacies. They make people pick up like paper prescriptions, and they feel like they're like fighting the fight against the big entities, and they're making a dent. And I think you're doing more work for your team.
You're doing more harm than good.
Clients.
Potentially losing a client.
And so, our strategy has been, instead of trying to compete or make it difficult for pet owners specifically, it's trying to just have a great online pharmacy option ourselves and market it and, be competitive in that way. And we don't carry as much, inventory on the shelves as practices I've seen in the past, because we know people want, easier access and being able to order it. So what has been your philosophy, and what did you end up doing with all that?
So, we went and similar to you, just said, okay, we're going to use an online pharmacy. So we started with VetSource, and we gave people whatever options they wanted, they could purchase online. We marked strategically our in-clinic items that they also had on the vet store on VetSource, similar, but they were slightly more because we do all the rebates for everyone. So we basically ended up streamlining the pharmacy. So we're a Zoetis practice, pretty much. I call it like a Zoetis practice. So we're using Zoetis products. So because I'm maximizing the rebates back to the client by doing so. And then we fill out the rebates for owners. And so that then they get that money coming back. It's not something they have to do at home. And that allowed us then to be like, okay, if you buy, Trio at VetSource, but you buy it in the clinic and we do the rebate, it's cheaper than buying it online. So that was one thing that we did. If anybody wants something from Chewy, we're like, whatever, here, we sign it and send it in. It's not, whatever. I would rather, in the conversation I have with them in a room, is I'd rather you have money to spend on medicine, meaning like, diagnostics and working up a case and, taking care of your dog or cat when it's sick, versus spending money, like if that can save you money, great. That can save you money. So
I think for me, it's unrealistic to not see the fact that, like, if your dog is on Apoquel all the time, or Vetmedin, or some of these like more expensive medication, like, it adds up.
Oh yeah.
And it does make a difference if you
Not only that, just the convenience. Like, I don't want to drive to my vet to go pick up medicine, just
like every
have it shipped
month.
to me.
Yeah. Because usually you're only doing like a 30, 45 day supply of chronic medications. And I'm like, I just want your dog on it. Like, I want your dog on their heart meds. I want them on their allergy meds. And if you're going to get it online and you'll get it quicker and you'll save a little money, like, I'm fine with that. Yeah. And the battle, though, and the perception of like, I'm going to make it hard on the pet owner, and that's going to somehow,
direct them back to
hurt Chewy. I'm like,
not going to happen.
I think the interesting thing about the COGS function that I realized over the years is that it's kind of self-correcting. The less product you carry, the fewer resources you have to inject into that function. So it's kind of like, you carry less, you don't really carry. You carry more, you just inject more resources. But as that trend goes down, you carry and sell, less and less product. It kind of self-corrects to a certain extent.
Well, I don't really understand why like people carry so many different products because your level of expertise when talking about said products goes way down, as well as then the confidence in talking about the products, then your follow through goes down. So like, why are you asking your staff to know 5 different, like that doesn't make any sense. If somebody needs something different than what we carry, well then here, you can go here and get it, kind of a scenario. So
are you going to go deal with our son?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And the other thing too that we found as we started to really dig into consultants and whatnot is that a lot of people, that's one of your bigger expense line items. So to the extent you can knock a couple points off of that or get it down to a manageable level to maximize your margins. Some of the horror stories that some of the consultants or classes we took about the levels of inventory that people had, they'd buy it, it's been there for 5 years. I mean, stuff like that. It's like, you can't, because you're not making a return on that. The longer it sits on the shelf, you've already expended the money for it. So it's just sitting there waiting to make a return. And if it never does, or you get to a point where even when you do make a return, it's actually a loss because of the carrying cost. So it's interesting. Very interesting.
I have no interest in inventory.
Well, see, that's the thing, right? As veterinarians, like, that's why I'm like, how did we ever end up as business owners? Like, how did the industry, like, how did that ever, like, what? Because we don't learn any of it. I think they're better nowadays at teaching students.
But I don't really want to learn it. No. Like, that's the bad thing, right? Is like,
that's not what
it's like when I was an equine student and I had to learn about like fish and I'm like, I'm never going to do this. Like, yeah. So sitting and understanding it and learning it and getting it, I like having somebody else that I can rely on. And I ask questions and I learn, but the level of understanding you need to have, I think having someone who truly knows what they're talking about makes a huge difference.
It does. Absolutely.
in your practice. That was actually, so talking about why are we doing this? Why are we business owners? At Dr. Stewart in the making said, wanted to know, why did you want to become a practice owner? What was the reason?
What was the reason why I wanted to become a practice owner?
Well, actually, what it was
never did. I was vehemently against it in the beginning. I was getting out of school. I was like, oh no, hell no, I'm never doing this. My dad said to me, we were moving from South Bend to Indianapolis, and he was like, you should really, think about owning a practice. And I had been out 5 years, I think.
Back up,
6 years.
You'd worked at a larger practice in South Bend.
Yeah.
So I mean, you kind of got a flavor for how the business like that would work, and you went to a subsequent larger practice and got a different flavor for how things would work. And I remember that you and I having those conversations thinking, we could probably do this.
Well, I think the motivation was that Trevor, once you decided to stay home with the kids because Trevor wasn't doing well, the second oldest son, then it was like, well, he has an MBA and a law degree, like, and we should probably just do this ourselves. Like, we're working for other people. We should just do this ourselves.
What it started off as a research project. And then we said, because this was a year or so before we opened the practice, and we said, let's just start to look into how this would even work. And that's where the business plan and the KPIs or lack thereof came into play. And we looked at a property or retail space, and everything just fell into place. But it was a journey, and it took about a year before, or maybe longer than that.
I don't remember. It was a long time ago.
We opened in 2003, and then we started talking about it, I think right after.
Well, I left Broad Ripple Animal Clinic to start my own practice. And the guy who ran that practice said to me, I told him, I said, you know what? I think I'm going to leave because I think I want to start my own practice. And he was like, you're just having an entrepreneurial brain fart. You will never make it to $1 million.
He said it will take years to get to $1 million. It'll take
years for you to get to $1 million in revenue.
The motivation you needed,
I was like, oh, because I am a person who's like, don't tell me I can't do something. Like, and so I was like, okay, this is definitely the right decision. And so then I went and worked for a guy who just needed some help, like just some extra set of hands. And so I worked for him while we were getting everything organized for the practice. And he was great. And he was a good resource and very supportive. And now the guy is like, hey, you're doing great. Like, that was awesome. And it's like, okay, yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I learned a lot from him. So I don't have any negative things, to say about him, because when I did work for him, I did take pieces of each owner that I worked for that I thought did things well, when I started.
And things you don't want to do.
And things I don't want to do, and put it together.
The biggest thing that I took away from previous bosses was, one told me, your clients won't be at your funeral, your family will. Mm-hmm. So make sure you still prioritize your family and that you're a wife and a mom before everything else.
Mhm.
That was huge. And he was super successful, but he still always did that. And then the other one was a great veterinarian, like the best. Everyone wanted to see him, very profitable, but he hated conflict and did not like dealing with people, talking to team members about things. And so I think the practice was still amazing because it had really good vets, but there was so much more that could have been done with the client experience. And so that was kind of the big moment of, you can be really good, and it's easier for me, especially, to be a veterinarian. Let me go do surgery. Let me go. It is the managing people and dealing with the culture and doing all the other things that is the really hard part. And I think the part that people shy away from when they're practice owners or even thinking about it. So I did have at hope.dvm24 wanted to kind of know about some of your recent posts that you had made. So one of the ones was holding up the sign. And I think you said that med needs to be less toxic. And you asked for people to kind of give you examples. So was that something when you were starting a practice that you were very kind of aware of how important culture was and trying to avoid all that? Or was it along the way, again, kind of the evolution of veterinary medicine and things that you've become more intentional with all that?
Oh, absolutely. I think in the beginning, it was like, I thought, if I'm just nice person and I'm, level-headed and a nice person, I treat people with respect, everyone else will do the same.
Yeah.
Not so much.
It's not. That is not the
It's good in theory.
I really sucked at hiring, and I really sucked at that. Because, you're so busy working, and like the primary objective was to get clients in the door and then make sure that they're very pleased with our services. And so I wasn't worried about the conversations going on around us. And yeah, so, it took, I made a ton of mistakes, and learned a lot. And at some point it was like, I live here basically. I'm here more than I'm at home. What do I want to live in? And so then turning it into that, and then figuring out through, we read a ton of books, and we did a lot of work as a group, so we would all read a book together, like the whole clinic would read a book together when we were smaller. It's like, oh, this is who we want to be. And so then everybody would be like, oh, remember, this is who we want to be. Not this isn't what we want. This is what we want to be. This is the experience we're creating. Oh, this is, what we're after at the end of the day. And so like getting everybody like on that same page was the first step. We still weren't good at holding people accountable. I'd say only now at my current age am I really good at holding people accountable.
Do you not like conflict? Or
I think in the beginning, absolutely. I was much more like you can do this. Good, fine, you're a great person, let's just do this, kind of a thing.
I'm probably like too much the extreme opposite. I'm like, this is not going to work, and I need you to get it together or you're gone. I am not giving people great chances. I'm like, I set the expectation, you didn't meet it. Something's going to change, and I'm not leaving. So you better, figure out what's going to change. And I've had to soften that, just especially with generational differences. There's certain team members that I'm like, hey, can I talk to you for a second? They're like, am I getting fired? No, we're just talking.
Yes. Oh, that's a very common. Yes.
And so it's, learning how to give feedback and how to talk a little bit better so that you don't completely terrify people. But I would say that overall, that's been something from the beginning I was very intentional about. But I'm also, because we're having so many more conversations about it in veterinary medicine, it's at the forefront of my mind all the time, the culture of everything. So, okay. So the other thing you talked about recently was the debt to income ratio. And that I think sparked a lot of conversation and a lot of things. And we around this table just in the last couple of days have talked a lot about just in general, the debt to income ratio. And we had a vet student, sitting here saying I think I'm going to be $200,000-$300,000, in, and it's going to be worth it because I'm going to be a surgeon and but I kind of just know what I got into.
Yeah.
And you and I were both pretty honest about if that was the debt that we had to take on when we started vet school, it would have made me second guess this career. And so talk a little bit more about that, like what you've heard from students and what you've kind of seen, I guess, over the years with all that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just changed so dramatically, over 20, whatever, 6, however many years it's been, too long. But I mean, I think it's staggering the amount of debt that they go into in order to pursue a profession that then is going to create anxiety. So like the profession itself is going to create anxiety. There'll be positive times, definitely, but it's hard. So like you're going you're going to incur all this debt. And then I think they have rose colored glasses on to some degree, because you're going to quickly hate the job when you can't do things that also add value to your life, like go on vacation, buy a house, have a family. Not maybe you don't want to have two people have two incomes and work. Maybe you want someone to stay at home with your kids, And so like all of a sudden now you don't have all those options. And I think it's really tragic because it doesn't, in my opinion, it doesn't need to be that way, because I think in the environment that we live in now, with the technology that we have, the schools don't need, they're just, again, because it's veterinary medicine, it's just so slow to change. We don't need, like we can conserve resources.
We can create a vet student without them spending $300,000.
Yes.
It seems like that should be a possibility.
And yet we're churning out veterinarians who don't want to do general surgery because they're too scared, because we're pushing people. I mean, like there's so many things going on. I'm like, what the Sam hell is happening? We have a veterinarians that come in that now aren't complete from the standpoint of what we would see as a traditional complete veterinarian. Okay, when you come out, you can do all these particular surgeries with mentorship, but with confidence. And now they're like, there's more of people saying, no, I don't want to do that, than there are people saying they want to do it. And it's like, wow, why? What happened in school that they told you that you weren't qualified or didn't have the skill set, or
like that you had to send that to a specialist, or you have to do this, or you can't.
Meanwhile, there's however many weeks waits now at a specialist because they're doing things that we should actually be doing instead of doing what they truly only they can do. And so I think that the debt just doesn't need to be where it's at.
I mean, it's multifaceted. And the question for you two would be, I mean, you guys got married in vet school. We met right before vet school, but would you have also kind of questioned the career choice, knowing the debt to income ratio? I mean, I don't think either of you are partners that would say like, no, don't do that. I think you're both really supportive, but to me, I feel like it would have been a little more of a conversation of like, as a couple, what are we actually getting into?
Because it's now two people that have the debt.
Yeah.
Well, I think the issue really was back then, it's really a question, have wages kept pace with the cost to enter the field? And to say when Emily was in school, even out of state, you could easily surpass the cost to enter the field for all 4 years your first year out. So say it cost you $40,000 to go to school, you start at 45 or whatever the average was back then. Now, I mean, the equivalent would be if it's 200, you'd have to make 400. You'd have to make at least a couple $100,000 out of the gate. And the problem that you have now is that the cost to enter the field has so far exceeded starting wages that it's a tough sell. I mean, it's a very tough sell. And I think that, given my background, if she had come to me and said, hey, it's going to cost me $500,000 to do this, but so of course that it's a conversation, because it has a long-term impact on your spending power, your purchasing power with regard to the wages, household wages, what you bring in. And despite what some say, I mean, that is counted against you because it's a negative cash outflow that's counted against your wages, whether it be if you want to get a mortgage or you want to open a business. For sure, if you want to open a business, I've dealt with enough lenders to know that they go with everything. So that's something that has to be considered. And it's not to say you don't do it. I just think you have to have a plan. You have to go.
You mentioned that at dinner the other night. Just be intentional. You have to have a plan that says, okay, when I get out of school, here's how I'm going to knock this out before I, have a family or have kids that have wants or needs, or try to get that knocked out or under control and some type of plan.
Right, because if you just do minimum payments, you're on a 30-year amortization. I mean, you get out at 28. I mean, you're 58. I mean, so that's all that money that you could otherwise. And that's the thing that always cracks me up, because they said, well, you can do this and take forever. And I was like, yes, but all the money that goes toward that debt service could go into investments that you're going to want when you're 58, because you start at 58, it's too late, guys. I mean, you're going to be working to your dead, and that's just the way it works. So
that's pretty much our plan today, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're doing that.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because they're so focused, we have a group of, and understandably so focused on work-life balance. I'm like, but that's going to be totally stripped. You're going to be stripped of that.
If you have to,
If you have that by the time, you know what I mean? Like you're going to keep working and you're not going, so it's like
I know an ER vet and she paid her debt off. She had a ton and she paid it off within 2 years working ER, but she worked, almost double the shifts we all worked. And she almost killed herself doing it. She paid her debt off and she's happy she did it. But she's like, I probably could have found a little more balance in there, but she's so stressed about trying to, pay it off. So she just picked up every shift she could. So there is a balance with that a little bit, but the question we kept asking is like, where's the money going?
Where's the money going?
Like,
where's the money going?
We're getting so many stories of schools that don't have specialists and they don't have staffing and, these vet schools that are teaching and training. So like, if they're paying 200, 300,000, like where is that money going for if it's not staffed, completely? And is it that they feel like the school needs a newer vet hospital or it needs more equipment? And so the money's going towards all those things that are gold standard that probably 15% of the pet population is actually ever going to use. And the students are learning about, should we be, and then they're never going to use it. Right. So we kind of sent out like a general thing, like, if you know where the money's going, like, let us know. Right. Yeah. If you work at vet schools or whatever, like we would love to know. Because I think that's where it starts. Everyone wants to talk about how much we're paying vets when they come out and things like that. But it starts with how much are they paying for the education and what are they getting from that?
Right.
And if they're cranking out the same number of graduates, that would be a question that I would have is like, how does it cost per graduate exploded from this to this? Are the resources necessarily better? I mean, are they better? I don't know the answer to that. I mean, are they better educated?
I mean, A&M has a big, beautiful new vet school. And when I went in it, I was like, this is amazing. They're like, this is the wellness room. This is the red light room. This is the massage room. And I'm like, what is all of this? I'm like, let me show you the dungeon I learned surgery in. Like, it was very different when I went to school. So, I mean, that's, I think, one of the big questions that we need to actually get to the root of. Like, some of the other things are important, but where does it all start? And if you're getting into it, do you know what you're getting into? What does that really look like? And I mean, I don't know.
Because I think they see it right now as fake money. So like, it's not hurting you. So it's really easy to be like, oh, like you can't, and you literally can't make yourself feel it. I don't think, so like it's a number, but yet you don't feel it. So you're like, it'll be okay. I'm going to love what I'm doing and I'll be able to make the payment. And, and so it's like, it's so like not tangible, like feeling. And so then you talk yourself into it, and I think that we can do better. I just think that we can do better as an industry in terms of like addressing what's going on. And everybody, let's address, and I'm like, come on, let's like really address it. Like what's actually
like
happening.
We're talking a lot, but like, can we actually do something to make a difference? And I don't think we have the answers, any of us, but I do think the trends and the things that have changed in the last couple of years, it's rapidly changing. And I don't know where the pendulum's going to stop swinging.
But again, I mean, somewhat supply and demand, right? I mean, has it changed the people that want to go to vet school? I mean, are the people that historically probably would have gone to vet school, but now are becoming dentists or human MDs because, the income out of school is going to be significantly different?
It has changed the demographics. That's for sure. I mean, you have way more females applying to vet school than males. And a lot of people are like, why are there not males? Most schools look at the percentages applying and then they take those percentages, into the school. So yes, less men are applying to vet school. And I do think debt to income ratio is part of that conversation. I don't know enough about it to go in depth into it, but I do think that it's changed. And then that has in turn changed the demographics in our industry, which has in turn changed hours worked. And, there's so much.
I think that a broader thing that I've seen over the past 20 years is a shift from traditional service providing the service of education, skill set attainment to a lower cost solution. So you're seeing now local community colleges saying, hey, you can go here for 2 years for a lot cheaper than it costs, because the cost even for undergrad has gotten so high that people have saying, well, listen, I could spend 80 or I could spend 40 or I could, and then, you know what I mean? So I think it's a very slow moving trend, but I think you're going to slowly see the market self-correct, maybe in vet med where there's lower cost solutions somewhere. And as soon as that happens, you'll start to see the cracks in the traditional service providers say, we need to offer something that's considerably cheaper than this because this competition's coming down the pike and it's going to be a threat. Could be a threat.
Yeah.
So
I'm worried that the self-correction is going to take so long that it's going to greatly impact our industry in a way that we can't come back from it. I mean, you see trends going towards some of the things in like human healthcare, and there's conversations being had about, well, how are vets pricing things and how much should they actually get paid? And you see things that are happening overseas where they're actually trying to cap salaries and things like that. So for me, my concern is our industry isn't going to self-correct and they're going to have the government or somebody else come in and say, hey, let me help you out with that, correction.
I could see a shift. You see in human med, like nurse practitioners and physicians assistants are much more common today. You can get to see them all day long, but the MDs, or the DOs, it's tougher. So you may see a shift in that regard to try and self-correct the shortage, basically, to see a vet. I could see that in the short term.
Or the cost, maybe it would be less expensive to see.
Right.
Well, the conversation, let's be honest, that they're having is that corporations are pushing to have like a technician assistant position or similar to, because it would be less of an investment for them to have that person versus a veterinarian, but they could charge what a veterinarian would charge.
Yeah, I think that's the outside looking in, but from a business perspective, it may just be an issue with the amount of veterinarians they can't get them, right? So if you can't get a vet, what do we do? How do we solve this problem?
Yeah, and I think the conversations that I've heard that I've been part of are that now a veterinarian can do these things. Like, so instead of spending your time on a third puppy visit, that a technician, I think we would both agree, a qualified technician could easily do a third round puppy visit, and then knowing that, okay, they have the backing of a veterinarian if they had some question or a problem or whatever. But then the veterinarian now is seeing a sick patient instead. You know what I mean? And so from a scaling perspective, I think the other advantage to doing something like that is that it increases wages for technicians so they move into more of a production wage scenario, which allows them to make more money without just exploding hourly wages.
I mean, that's true, because on your post about debt to income ratio, people were like, yeah, vets are getting paid more, but what about all our support team members? And I do think, we pay more than I know other people pay in the area to our support team members, but that is still a trend that needs to change. But for me, if you utilize your licensed technicians fully, I don't know that you need to add a position. I think you just need to utilize your licensed technicians and train them fully.
So talk about y'all's growth model. So like you said, it was just you. When did you say, okay, we need to expand, we need more vets?
Because it's a conversation.
Yeah,
middle of the night, I'm like, I think I need, and he's like, what? You need to hire somebody? I don't know. And I'm like, yeah, I need to prepare for the growth. And he's like, no, we need the growth, and then
that's how he always was originally.
And if I had any regret over the years, was that I was much too focused on the short term bottom line in lieu of looking at how do we position ourselves for growth. Because to me, it was always a capacity demand issue. It was like, do you have the demand do you have the capacity to accommodate the demand? So, if you hire a veterinarian, can you keep them busy? Can you pay for them? Can you do all those things you need to do? And what I should have been doing is saying, we're going to hire a veterinarian and let that demand develop, because now the book is open. And that's what actually happened once we started.
It happens all the time. That's why we have 11 veterinarians. We could have stopped, like even this most recent hire. And it's so funny because now the people that have been there long enough are like, they get it. It doesn't ruffle their feathers or anything. But the new people are like, what do you mean? We're adding another veterinarian. I'll be too slow. Like, this can't, what are we going to do? And it's like, guys, like,
part of that, go
talk to like the 4 veterinarians previously. They've all felt that same way. Like, it'll be fine. It's going to be fine. And of course it's fine. I get a text from somebody, you couldn't have added that veterinarian at a better time. It's like, yes. So like one of the things that we did was we monitored fill rates. So we started, our person who does all of our chart checking started monitoring fill rates. So like, how full are these veterinarians? So then it's a very non-emotional feeling. So I can go to them, I can go, your fill rate has not changed. Everything's good. You're at 95%. You've been at 95% for 3 years. Nothing's changed. Like, or, okay, every time we get to 70% fill rate, we add a veterinarian. So and then to his point, I mean, yeah, once you open, and one of my first guy I worked for was always like, you add a person, they will come. And so then
and it never failed.
It
was always the more we had.
I mean, I love hearing that.
And
That
did you
supports my-
add support staff with a vet? So like, okay, for every vet I hire, then I'm hired to support staff. I mean, it's
Yeah,
kind
you
of
have that cost structure, that labor cost structure. So you'd say this pod basically is going to cost me this on an annualized basis. So in order to preserve margin, they need to produce X, whatever that is. And then you would work backwards and say, okay, what does my EBITDA look like after I add these people? And that's what we always did. And it always, like kind of going back to what I was saying before, I would have probably started hiring in year 2 or 3 a veterinarian as quickly as we could.
Yeah.
To take that, to accommodate that growth, because our growth is really good, but it could have been better. I mean, we had really, really healthy growth above industry standard, but it could have accelerated more. I mean, and part of that comes down to demographics. I mean, you have population density growth. You have all those things that go into there. If you have an extremely rural practice, it just depends,
Yeah, I think also like square footage available, right? I mean, it sounded like y'all just kind of a space opened up, you acquire the space next to you.
I mean, we'd always break down the hour into like 30-minute increments and say, how do you structure the room flow to basically accommodate? You can't have 5 veterinarians in 3 exam rooms, but so you'd have to kind of think ahead a little bit and say, how are we going to accommodate?
So then we would move someone, and so then that's when we started having somebody in surgery all day. Yeah. Like, what I mean? So then now they're not using exam rooms, but they're generating revenue in a different part of the practice. So now we have 2 parts of the practice generating revenue. Like, so it's just like kind of like the slow feed. But I think, yes, every veterinarian has an assistant and a technician. So anytime we hire a veterinarian, we either move someone, so we hire within, because people a lot of times, they start as receptionists and they want to move to an assistant, and then they want to move, or they started tech appointments and they want to move, so then we hire within and then fill those roles, or we just hire from outside.
Yeah. I mean, I try to kind of overstaff our team so that if someone's out, we still can function. And then the way that we structured now, like the call center and other things, like I can have a tech in there, I can have somebody in there answering medical questions. So, but we basically are staffed enough that I think we could have another veterinarian in there and be more consistent with it. So we're going to have a conversation about this.
I think there's 2 reasons to hire a veterinarian, right? It's either to increase revenue, because that's the only way you increase your revenue is by hiring another veterinarian, like substantially anyway, or, to change your quality of life. So, I mean, depending on what the reason is, then.
I mean, this is kind of just an experiment for us, I think. Like,
we do joke about that a lot. We're like,
hey, let's try this.
About like what a vet hospital could be and like what we could do with one for so long. And then now we're actually getting to do it. And I would say a lot of the decisions we've made have been really great. And then there's always been some that we're like, we could have probably done that better. So that's probably a good wrap up question, because we could talk all day.
Oh, yes. I know.
So we're going to have to wrap it up at some point. But what is, one of the decisions you made that you felt like was just the best decision ever? And then what's something that you're like, that was not a good decision, or we tried that and it failed miserably? From each of you, I'd like to kind of hear something, or business related or life related, whatever you think.
You can't say like the 4th kid was the 3rd kid was.
Stop it, 3 kid. No.
So what we look back and say that was a great decision, and something we look back and say that was not great.
No. Like, for example, great decision, marrying Shane.
Oh.
Like, I wouldn't be here and be doing what I'm doing without his support, without someone that just gets it and has the same mindset when it comes to trying things and, I don't know, wanting the best for our family, but also is kind of hungry in general. So.
Yeah, and I would say...
You don't have to say something nice back. It's okay.
I tried. Everybody saw that. I tried.
I'm the most encouragement person. So that was just an example, but it can be anything. I mean, if it's something related to the practice, that's great too. But
I think Emily and I make a good team because we complement each other in a lot of different ways. She is very much an optimist, and I am sometimes in a business context a pessimist. Yeah, I try and say, okay, that's a great idea, but
yeah, how are we going to pay for that?
Right, how are we going to do this? So, but it's a nice mix, and I think that's what made the clinic so successful was that we did complement each other in that regard. And I was always I always like to learn. I know one of the things that I always say is that the more you learn, the more you realize what you don't know. And I think it's empowering but humbling at the same time. And that's something that I always try to do at the clinic. Was within my function, constantly learn so that we are being the best we can be, and maximizing our success while at the same time balancing family, things like that, creating that dynamic that's healthy for everybody. So that's probably one of the best things that I have, in terms of best decisions.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we are always like the whole thing would never have been possible without Richie staying home and being like, just go and make it successful. Like do whatever you have to do to make it work. Because as a mom, you're constantly in this internal battle of like not being present. Or, like I always talk to the other moms of the clinic, it's like you're always going to disappoint someone. So who are you disappointing today? It was always a struggle I always had. Am I going to disappoint my kid because I'm not going to be present? Or am I going to have to disappoint a client because now I can't do their emergency surgery? And so it eased the load knowing that he was always there to keep that feeling like under control. Like it's fine. Everything's fine. Nobody's disappointed on this end. Like it's okay. Like just go do whatever you got to do. So I think like from a personal and emotional perspective, that was probably the biggest thing that allowed us to move forward and propel ourselves into a place that was very successful. I think from a business side, it was going through all the machinations of VGP.
Yeah, VGP
I think that really put us in a whole different ball game.
What was VGP?
It was an offshoot of Pathway. It was actually a genius strategy they had. There's something else now. It was called Pathway Partners, and VGP, they partnered with Zoetis, and Zoetis, if you were a Zoetis practice, they would come in and pay the consult fees for your VGP consultant, and they would you would meet every 6 weeks. They would give you KPIs to look at and hold you accountable. Say, what are you doing to fix your COGS percentage? You're 30, you need to be at 22 or whatever. And they would make sure you had a mission statement. They would basically just, a coach is probably too strong a word, but somebody to hold you accountable and kind of guide you through improvement of the business side of the practice.
Yeah, and implement, teach you how to implement a lot of different strategies that are missing, in practices. And it changed everything.
It was based upon a book. I can't remember. Traction.
Yeah.
But it was brilliant because it was an offshoot of Pathway, which then gave them an in to go in and find really good practices to purchase. So I remember thinking, this is actually genius. And Sean, the guy that started Pathway, started that too. And it was a great experience for us. And we were always aggressive and trying to be better, constant self-improvement. I call it the quest of self-improvement. It's constant, trying to be better. And that really helped supercharge what we were trying to do. It gave us kind of meat to the bones when we were sort of in the,
and how far along into practice were you when you did that? Still started in 03?
10 years.
10 years.
Yeah, at least 10 years.
I thought you were going to say hiring Harrison to do your marketing. No.
Yes, and hiring Harrison to do the marketing.
we gotta shout him out.
That's a funny story because I had sort of started doing some of that stuff, but I remember one time I gave him something, a video I had done. It was horrible. And I said, hey, can you punch this up? And he gives it back to me. I was like, I'm never doing this again. It's like, just never mind.
30 minutes later.
Right. So, but he did, he was an integral part of bringing a fresh new set of eyes. And at the, your guys' earlier point about you're not getting stuck in your own way, the ways that are comfortable. I think it's really crucial to get those fresh set of eyes and perspectives to look at a function or an operation and say, have you thought of this? And that's what he brought to the practice. He just really supercharged everything and took it to the next level, a level that I could never have imagined. So
what about failures? Anything stand out as like a
oh, so many probably.
I just think it's good to share. We're sitting here and I feel like all of us have
everything's so positive,
done well. Yeah. But
I think, this isn't really a failure. It's more just a lesson. It was, whenever you think, when we first opened, we had we tried to be everything to everybody. And that's where I think it worked for a time in terms of buzz and all this, but we quickly found out that you kind of have to, what's your core skill set and what do you want to be? And you can't really be everything to everybody. So we're trying to manage, the kennel and board or grooming and all this stuff at the expense potentially of your vet, med service side. So we slowly started to attrit out some of those functions and say, we're just going to focus on this. And the last to go was boarding. We looked at the square footage and said, this is much more money doing this and service more clients if we converted it to vet med. And that's what we did. And other people, other service providers in the area, they were just better than us. I'd go tour their places. I was like, I just can't do it, So, and it really wasn't big enough to be a big cash cow. So
I think we cut that out day one.
Yeah. We bought the practice and we're like, we're not boarding anymore. Yeah.
Which is actually a trend that I think is slow to change, but it's necessary because they're, again, you need to really focus on what you're good at. And
like you said, there's other third parties out there that are doing just boarding that are great at what they do.
In the area.
Let them do that.
Let them do it.
Yeah. Yep. Let them do it. So
what about you, Dr. Emily?
I would say probably not addressing like bad apples fast enough. A bad apple can run a barrel of good apples faster than, and so like just not having the confidence to, manage those things in a more timely fashion when I was younger.
Yeah. It's very hard, especially if you like someone as a person, but it's not
a good fit.
They're not a good fit. Yeah. For the team. So, well, that's great. Is there anything else you guys want to share?
Well, what's your bad thing? What's your?
I wish in some ways I'd become a practice owner sooner. Because I feel like we would have been, I feel behind in like what we could have done, but I also feel like we found the right practice for us and we wouldn't have found it sooner. So I don't know. But that's, I think, always going to be something that I kind of wonder, like if we had started much sooner, what could we have made the practice? Because I don't want to work till I'm, 70. Right. So I do want to grow it and have it be successful, but eventually I want to transition out and do other things. And so, I feel like I'm on a really tight timeline, which is a little more stressful.
Sure. Yeah.
In some ways. But what about you?
I think mine's probably ongoing. I feel like sometimes we probably stretch ourselves too thin instead of focusing on the things that really could have a big impact. So probably just better time management with some of the other things that we have going on. Like, hey, this would be cool if we did this. Yeah. That type of stuff.
Except for the cool project we're doing with y'all. Oh, God. So you guys keep watching. But we do appreciate everyone who is listening. If you have any questions for us, you can reach out to us on social media. You can follow us on Instagram, TikTok. You can watch us on YouTube, and you can listen to us on any of your podcast providers, Apple or Spotify. We just love veterinary medicine. We love talking about it, and we love the people in it. So we appreciate you guys being here today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, it was great. Y'all have a wonderful day, and thanks for listening.